The cold rain washed over the debris of a crumbling city as Kang Hanmoo scavenged for scraps. He clutched a shattered mana crystal, knowing it was barely worth enough for a single meal. A group of high-ranking hunters walked past him, their polished armor gleaming despite the gloom. One of the hunters kicked dirt onto Hanmoo's tattered jacket without even looking back. In this world, an E-rank scavenger was lower than the monsters they hunted. He returned to his cramped basement room, the smell of mold filling his lungs. From his pocket, he pulled out a strange, dark stone he had inherited from his grandfather. The stone felt unnaturally warm against his cold, trembling skin. Suddenly, a sharp needle of light shot out from the artifact and pierced his thumb. A holographic window flickered into existence, defying everything he knew about Hunter Awakening. The screen displayed a single message: "Enter the Hell difficulty tutorial." With nothing left to lose in his miserable life, Hanmoo reached out and pressed accept. The ground beneath him dissolved into a swirling vortex of black shadows. He felt his body being torn apart and reassembled in a matter of seconds. Hanmoo slammed onto a hard stone floor that smelled of sulfur and ancient blood. A massive iron gate groaned open at the far end of the desolate chamber. From the shadows emerged a pack of skeletal wolves with eyes burning like embers. Hanmoo scrambled backward, his hands searching for a weapon he didn't have. The lead wolf lunged with impossible speed, tearing into Hanmoo's shoulder. He screamed as the world faded to black, the sensation of teeth grinding against bone being the last thing he felt. A second later, Hanmoo gasped for air, finding himself standing at the center of the room once again. His clothes were still torn, but the wound on his shoulder had vanished completely. The notification appeared again. Death count, 1. Retrying tutorial stage 1. He picked up a jagged bone from the floor, gripping it like a makeshift dagger. The iron gate opened again, and the same skeletal wolves stepped into the light. This time, Hanmoo watched their movements, noticing the slight twitch before they pounced. He dodged the first strike, but the second wolf caught him across the throat. Once more, he woke up at the starting point, his heart hammering against his ribs. Death count 2, the system mocked, but Hanmoo felt a spark of defiance growing. He died 10 more times, then 20, each time lasting a few seconds longer. His fear began to numb, replaced by a mechanical understanding of violence. On the 50th attempt, Hanmoo drove the bone shard through the lead wolf's skull. A golden light erupted from the creature's remains, flowing into Hanmoo's chest. Level up. Physical resistance has increased to level 5. He understood now this wasn't just a prison, it was a forge for his very soul. He cleared the first stage, but the next room was filled with poisonous green fog. As he stepped forward, the toxin melted his skin, causing an unbearable burning sensation. He didn't run, he stood in the poison until his lungs collapsed and he died again. Respawn, enter, die, respawn, enter, die. After hundreds of deaths, a new notification flashed. Poison resistance reached max level. His blood began to turn a dark, viscous purple, humming with toxic power. He walked through the green fog as if it were a light summer breeze. At the end of the hall, a boss monster 10 times larger than the wolves awaited him. The knight raised its blade, the heat singeing Hanmoo's hair from 10 feet away. Hanmoo didn't flinch, his eyes reflecting the flames with a cold, murderous intent. He lunged forward, moving faster than any E-rank human should ever be able to. The blade clipped his side, but he barely felt the internal organs rupturing. He plunged his hand, now coated in toxic purple mana, directly into the knight's chest plate. As the knight dissolved into ash, a final notification appeared that chilled his heart. Hidden condition met. You have unlocked the gate to the true hell. Suddenly, a massive clawed hand reached out from the portal and grabbed Hanmoo by the face. He tried to activate his return skill, but the system screen glitched and turned red. Warning, return is disabled in the true hell dimension until the final floor is cleared. As he was dragged into the abyss, he realized his nightmare had only just begun. The crushing darkness of the abyss felt like cold lead pressing against Hanmoo's lungs. Suddenly, a blinding flash of golden light erupted from the return stone clutched in his bleeding palm. He felt his molecular structure unraveling and reassembling in the span of a single heartbeat. His boots hit the dusty floor of his cramped apartment with a heavy thud. He looked at the digital clock on the wall and realized only 1 second had passed in the real world. Despite the safety of his home, the phantom pain of being torn apart still lingered in his nerves. He summoned his status window, holding his breath as the translucent screen flickered into existence. A new passive skill sat at the top of the list: Immortal Poison Blood. The skill description explained that his blood had become a lethal toxin due to the repeated deaths in the poisonous pits of hell. He realized that if he could survive the tutorial again, he could bring back more than just skills. With a grimace of resolve, he activated the stone once more and plunged back into the nightmare. He reappeared in the middle of a swarm of toxic sludge monsters in the Hell dimension. This time, he didn't run. He lunged forward with a rusted dagger he had scavenged. The acid sprayed across his skin, but instead of melting, his body absorbed the toxin hungrily. A notification rang out, announcing that his poison resistance had reached level 10. For months in Hell time, he repeated this cycle: hunt, die, adapt, and repeat. His once scrawny frame began to swell with dense, functional muscle that vibrated with power. He discovered a patch of ghost herbs, a legendary resource that could jumpstart any hunter's mana circuit. He carefully harvested the herbs, knowing they would fetch a fortune back on Earth. With his inventory full of rare loot, he activated the return stone to check his progress in the real world. He walked out of his bathroom and caught his reflection in the full-length mirror. He was nearly 4 inches taller, and his eyes held a predatory sharpness that wasn't there before. The clothes he wore as a scavenger now strained against his broadened shoulders. It was time to visit the Hunters Association to re-evaluate his rank. Walking through the city, he noticed how slow and clumsy everyone else seemed to his enhanced senses. A group of C-rank hunters walked past, laughing loudly, oblivious to the monster standing right next to them. He arrived at the massive glass-walled Hunters Association building. The receptionist didn't even look up as he presented his E-rank identification card. "Testing room 4, she droned, pointing toward a heavy steel door. Hanmoo entered the room, where a massive crystal orb sat on a pedestal to measure mana capacity. He placed his hand on the cold surface and allowed a tiny fraction of his Hellforged mana to flow out. The crystal began to hum, then vibrate violently as purple lightning danced within its core. The testing officer's jaw dropped as the mana reading bypassed the B-rank threshold in seconds. Hanmoo pulled his hand back just before the crystal shattered under the pressure. He didn't wait for the official certificate, knowing that revealing too much power too early would be dangerous. On his way out, he was stopped by a tall woman in a professional suit who carried the aura of a high ranker. "I've never seen an E-rank walk with such a balanced center of gravity," she remarked, her eyes narrowing. Hanmoo offered a polite but cold nod, attempting to move past her without a word. She watched him leave, her hand instinctively reaching for a communication device to report a possible unregistered awakened. Back in his room, Hanmoo prepared for his final descent into the Hell Tutorial's boss chamber. A sudden earthquake shook the city, followed by a siren that signaled a dungeon break nearby. This wasn't supposed to happen for another 3 years, according to the original timeline. Massive winged shadows began to pour out of the rift, descending upon the unsuspecting civilians below. Hanmoo realized the world was changing much faster than he had anticipated. As the first monster crashed through his window, he bared his teeth, ready to show Earth what a scavenger from Hell could do. Hanmoo dodged the monster's claws with a grace that defied human physics. He drove his fist into the creature's chest, letting his poisonous mana liquefy its internal organs instantly. News of the sudden S-rank gate opening in the Heart of Seoul spread like wildfire across every screen. Hanmoo stood atop a skyscraper, watching the military's futile attempts to contain the emerging horde. The association's top-ranked hunters arrived, their faces pale as they realized the boss was beyond their capabilities. Hanmoo jumped from the roof, cutting through the air like a meteor aimed at the center of the chaos. The lead S-rank hunter, a woman named Sarah, gasped as a figure landed before her with the force of an earthquake. He told her to step back because she would only be in the way of his coming harvest. Thousands of lower-tier monsters rushed toward Hanmoo, sensing his immense life force. With a single wave of his hand, a tidal wave of poisonous blood erupted from the ground, melting the front line. The S-rank hunters watched in silence as a man they didn't recognize cleared the entire street in seconds. The ground shook violently as the Abyssal King finally stepped through the gate, towering over the buildings. Hanmoo recognized this creature as a variant he had killed 100 times during his stay in Hell. He whispered that the king looked much smaller when he wasn't starving to death in a frozen wasteland. The Abyssal King let out a roar that shattered the glass of every skyscraper within 3 miles. Hanmoo activated his Eternal Hunger skill, causing his aura to expand until it rivaled the demon's size. The two titans collided, sending a shockwave that leveled the surrounding city blocks. Hanmoo felt his ribs crack under the pressure, but he simply used the instant regeneration he earned from dying 1,000 times. He realized that the Hell difficulty wasn't a curse, but a forge meant to prepare him for this very moment. He summoned the Hellfire chains, binding the Abyssal King's limbs to the earth. Hanmoo leaped onto the demon's head, his hands glowing with the concentrated essence of a dying star. With a final cry, he drove his power into the king's skull, causing the massive entity to disintegrate into ash. The portal above the city collapsed, its energy dispersing harmlessly into the atmosphere. Silence fell over the city as citizens crawled out from their shelters to witness the miracle. Hanmoo stood in the center of the wasteland, his armor cracked but his spirit more vibrant than ever. Sarah approached him tentatively, asking who he was and where he had come from. He looked at his hands, once scarred and weak, and told her he was just a scavenger who refused to stay dead. The other hunters knelt in respect, recognizing a power that far surpassed the ranking system. Hanmoo felt the artifact in his pocket hum one last time before it turned to dust, its purpose finally fulfilled. He knew that Earth was no longer defenseless against the terrors of the void. Within days, Hanmoo's story became a legend that gave hope to every low-rank hunter in the world. He opened a new training center where he taught others that talent was nothing compared to the will to survive. He finally visited his parents' grave, placing a high-tier mana stone there as a symbol of his success. The nightmares of hell had stopped, replaced by the peaceful reality he had fought so hard to protect. His old scavenger friends joined him, no longer afraid of the future or the monsters lurking in the dark. The Hunter Association officially declared him the first God-rank hunter in human history. Hanmoo walked into the sunset, ready for whatever challenges the universe might throw at him next. He realized that even the deepest hell could be the foundation for a magnificent paradise. Kang Hanmoo, the hunter who returned from hell, had finally found his home. The age of the scavenger had ended, and the era of the strongest protector had begun.